I was doing some research recently and I stumbled across the $70 million UPS employee story told by Tony Robbins in one of his books, Money Mastered the Game. It's a very inspiring story to go from no more than $14,000 per year to $70 million in assets by investing in the stock market. It's life-changing. I believe Tony Robbins is a much better storyteller than I am, and therefore I will let him tell you the story, and then I will tell you what Tony didn't tell you, and if you stay until the end, I promise that you are going to be surprised.
The most important thing is get started with whatever you have, because if you do that, you get to tap into the power of compounding we all know about, but very few people use. I'll give you an example, a guy named Theodore Johnson. You probably never heard of him. Worked for UPS. Never made more than $14,000 in an entire year of his life, and yet when he retired he had $70 million and he didn't inherit a dime. So how do you do that? A friend of his said, you've got to stop being a consumer and you've got to become an owner. You've got to become an investor. And he said, I have no money to invest. I make $14,000 a year. And his friend said, no one has money to invest, but if the government came by and put a 20% tax above what you're paying now, you would scream, you'd yell, and you'd ban. You'd adjust. I'm going to make you a wealthy man. He took the 20% off the top, never let him see it, put it straight in the investment account. It was worth $70 million, compounding by the time he was in retirement. So people don't really get how powerful that is. You don't earn your way to a fortune. You invest your way. You compound it. Most people are trading time for money. And as an entrepreneur, that's the worst trade you can ever make.
All right, here's what Tony Robbins didn't tell you. Mr. Johnson's salary of $14,000 per year would be the equivalent of $135,000 per year in today's money. We've got to pay attention that Mr. Johnson retired in 1952 from a VP position at UPS, and he reached his top income of $14,000 per year back then before the retirement age. Therefore, his 20% tax on his income would be the equivalent of about $27,000 per year in savings in today's money, which is not bad at all. The second thing that Tony Robbins forgot to tell you is that by the time Mr. Johnson retired in 1952, he owned as much as $700,000 worth of UPS stock, which would be the equivalent of about $6.7 million in today's money. So by the time Mr. Johnson retired in 1952, he already had $700,000 in his nest egg, which would be the equivalent of about $7 million in today's money, which is very, very impressive by only saving 20% of his income. But his nest egg got to $70 million only about 40 years later. But this goes to show that once you reach a certain level of wealth, even if you do not contribute anything anymore, your wealth is going to compound over time to reach unimaginable numbers. Like, who would have thought that he would end up with $70 million by 1990? I'll post in the description down below a New York Times article from 1991 where he discusses how he's going to donate about half of his wealth. The third thing that Tony Robbins didn't tell you is that Mr. Johnson did not invest in an index fund. To the contrary, he concentrated in one stock alone, UPS stock, because by the time he retired, he already had about $700,000 worth of UPS stock. He invested in one company he knew the best, the one that he worked for his entire life. He bet big and bold, and his bet paid off. Much like Warren Buffett, he used the power of concentration and he invested in one company that he knew the best, that he could predict what that company would do in the future, that he was most familiar with as an industry, and therefore he bet his entire fortune on that company. Now, while you might hate me for spoiling the story, here are a few things that I learned when taking into consideration the new information that I just gave you about the story. First, inflation is going to crush you if you're going to stay in cash. This is a very important lesson for me because for much of my teens, I've been staying in cash and I deeply regret it. I lost about half of the purchasing power of my savings because I did not know what to do with the money. I did not know much about personal finance or investing or anything else. All I did was save my money and then keep it for some future opportunities. So while Mr. Johnson 10x'd his investment, I probably lost about half in purchasing power because I saved in the local currency and I did not hedge my savings with dollars, euros, and the local currency devalued more than the other currencies. So it is what it is. This is why Ray Dalio and other bright minds tell you that cash is trash. While staying in cash might be and might seem very safe because there's no volatility involved, every single year your currency devalues. And as you can see, $700,000 in 1952 would be the equivalent of about $7 million today. So you can see how much devaluation could happen over a span of 70 years. So the solution to this is to keep about 6 to 12 months in an emergency fund that you can access at any time, and that's going to be liquid, and the rest should be invested in assets that are going to protect your wealth against inflation, in assets that are going to grow much more than inflation itself, or at least with inflation. And the second thing that I learned from the story is that while diversification could be useful for about 99% of the people, for some it might not be necessary, and betting big on one company, betting big on one stock could do tremendously well in the future. This is very much in line with Warren Buffett's view on diversification, where he recommends that about 99% of the people invest in the S&P 500 index, where basically their investment would track the growth of the US economy overall. He gives his advice toward the 99% bracket because many people, or about 99% of the people, are not willing to research individual companies, are not willing to look at balance sheets, want something that's completely passive, and they just want to throw in the money and let the money grow without ever thinking about anything else. But for the 1% that are willing to do the work and that are willing to read balance sheets, to learn about individual businesses, to learn how to invest in individual companies, how to analyze them, how to determine their value, and to buy them at a discount to that value, then he recommends concentration and not diversification, because in fact, there aren't that many businesses there aren't as many wonderful businesses, as he would call it, that could compound your money and our money at high rates of return. In Warren Buffett's view, if you find 2 to 3 wonderful companies in your entire investing life, you would end up very, very rich. And as we can see with Mr. Johnson, he ended up very, very rich with only one company, not even 2 or 3. He found one wonderful company, he invested everything that he had in that company, and he was handsomely rewarding for doing so. Of course, the opposite is also true. Things could have gone bad and he could have lost his entire nest egg, because, well, when you have your entire eggs in one basket, if that basket is not properly taken care of, all the eggs could break in that basket. But if you have your eggs in multiple baskets, one can break and you can still have the rest. This is the beauty of diversification. But in Warren Buffett's view, by having the eggs in too many baskets at once, the returns are going to suffer in the future. And that's why he advises that for those who are willing to do the work and are willing to bring an intensity to the game, to concentrate as much as possible, because the returns would be much, much higher if they would invest their money, or if we would invest our money in wonderful companies. Alright everyone, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you found it useful. If you did so, all I ask you is to please consider giving it a like, because it tremendously helps with the YouTube algorithm. Feel free to subscribe if you want to learn more about personal finance, investing, and also investing in the stock market. And until next time, take care, have a wonderful day, and don't forget that you are amazing.